What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily, and in this video, we are checking out the new Motorola Moto G9 Power. This phone launched just a couple of weeks ago. It's, of course, the successor to last year's G8 Power, and it's a really affordable device with an interesting collection of features that I think could make it a good potential option in Motorola's very vast smartphone lineup this year. I'll go over everything you need to know about this new phone here, but first things first, let's go ahead and unbox this thing and see what all comes inside the package. Now, the retail price for the G9 Power is right around $250 depending on where in the world you live, but I've already actually seen it on Amazon, for example, discounted by 20 or 30 bucks. And if you're interested in doing some comparison shopping of your own, I'll leave some links down below to all the deals and discounts. So pulling off the lid, you can see that the first thing we get is the phone itself. And right off the bat, I have to say, this is a big, thick, and very tall device. We'll set it to the side for just a second, and digging a little deeper in the box, you can see we also get a couple pieces of paper and the SIM ejector tool. Underneath all that stuff, there are a couple more included accessories. You get a 20-watt USB wall plug and a USB-A to USB-C charging cable. With all that stuff out of the way, here is the Moto G9 Power once again. And like I said a moment ago, the first thing you notice about this phone is its size. The G9 Power is an absolutely massive 6.8-inch smartphone. It's also nearly 8 ounces in weight, and altogether this is certainly one of the beefiest devices I've held in my hand. Now, you might have noticed that the G9 Power actually ships with its included clear case already pre-installed. It's just a super simple, flexible, rubbery case to protect your new phone. Definitely nice that Motorola threw one in there. And if you're curious, I got my G9 Power in this new electric violet color, which I think looks really awesome. It's also available in sage green as well. And the G9 Power, since it is still a budget device, is made mostly from plastic, though the slight metallic shine and subtle texture finish do convey a bit of a sense of quality. I think overall, while you can tell this is a budget device, there's nothing particularly cheap about it. It looks nice, it feels good, and interestingly enough, Motorola even advertises this phone as water repellent. That's the exact term that they use, so an accidental spill or splash shouldn't do the device any harm. The massive display on the G9 Power is framed by fairly slim bezels, at least up top and down the sides. There's a corner hole punch camera cutout in the top left, and across the bottom, we do get a sizable chin that certainly does add to the overall size a bit. And in the hand, aside from that sheer size and the weight, the toughest part about handling this device is managing its height. It has a tall 20.5 by 9 aspect ratio, and with that added bottom bezel, it's certainly quite the stretch to reach all the sides and corners of the screen. However, getting such a massive display at this price point is pretty great, so as long as it does work for you, I think this has the potential to be a decent setup, especially for consuming content. Taking a look around at everything else, on the left side, we've got the SIM and SD card tray, dual SIM support, or one SIM and one SD card depending on your needs. Below that, there's a dedicated Google Assistant button. On the right side, you'll find the power and volume buttons. Up top, there's a headphone jack, and down below, there's the USB-C charging port and single speaker setup, which is kind of interesting because last year's G8 Power had stereo speakers. And this actually is one of a few features this year on this phone that actually seems to be a downgrade from last year's phone for whatever reason. And here's just a quick audio sample so you can get an idea. Around back, you'll find a newly redesigned triple lens camera setup and flash, which I'll talk about in a minute. And right smack in the middle there, that Motorola logo and dimple is, of course, the fingerprint sensor. Really glad to have a physical fingerprint reader on this phone for obvious reasons nowadays, and this setup is something I think everyone is familiar with already with these Motorola phones. On this phone, it is a tiny bit higher up just because the phone is so tall, but all in all, I'm glad to have it to begin with. You can also set up face unlock as well if you'd like, and actually this to me is even faster than the fingerprint sensor, which is great. Motorola has some additional tweaks like raise to wake to assist you in getting into your phone as fast as possible. So no matter what setup you have here, I think it does all work great. Now, jumping back to the display, there's a bit more than just its size to talk about here. The 6.8-inch screen on the new Moto G9 Power is actually a 1640 by 720 resolution display. They call it their Max Vision HD Plus screen, but I call it a significant downgrade from the full HD 1080p screen on the G8 Power. Now, this goes along with ditching the stereo speakers for sure, but this change I think is even more confusing. I just don't really understand the move here. Fortunately, as it is, the display itself isn't too bad. It's an IPS LCD display, and while it isn't the brightest in the world, I think it still looks pretty good, especially for watching content in that wider aspect ratio format. And to be completely honest, at this size, while pixels are certainly visible given the fact that it's only about 263 pixels per inch, I've seen more pixelated displays before, so it's not the worst in the world. But it's just the principle of the thing. I could go on a whole rant, but the point is I don't really get why some of these smartphone manufacturers are releasing new phones with fewer or worse specs and features than the previous year's devices. It just makes no sense. And for G8 Power users now, it's probably tough to consider upgrading. Fortunately, it's not all bad news. The rest of the phone, both inside and out, saw a couple more actual upgrades. And I think the first big thing worth mentioning is the battery. Like the name suggests, the G9 Power is meant to be a powerhouse of a phone. And this year we get a massive 6,000 milliamp battery crammed inside. That's 1,000 more milliamp capacity than the G8 Power. It's also why this phone is so thick and so heavy. And it means this device should power through a day and a half or more of use without ever needing a charge. I'm certainly going to put this phone to the test to see just how long it can last, but this is definitely one of the bigger battery smartphones you can buy in this price range. So if longevity is what you're after, this is certainly something to consider. Inside, the new G9 Power is now powered by the new Snapdragon 662 chipset and Adreno 610 GPU, 4 gigabytes of RAM, and now twice as much built-in storage, 128 gigs, along with SD card support. Performance-wise, I consider these specs to be more of a sidestep versus last year's G8, not exactly an upgrade, but I don't really find it any worse. This phone, at least out of the box, feels fast and fluid, with a solid Android 10 experience for now, paired with Motorola's own flair and tweaks. There's nothing that I've experienced so far with regards to performance issues, and actually I find the phone to feel even better than I initially thought. There are certainly some useful additions for enthusiasts that Motorola throws in there, like their gaming mode add-ons for better performance, and I certainly think this phone can handle just about anything you might want to throw at it, but I'm not so sure that it's the worthwhile spec upgrade G8 Power owners were looking for, so that might be the only downside. Still, for a vast majority of people at that $250 price point, I think there's more than enough to work with. And paired with that massive battery anyway, and the lower resolution display, which in this case might be a positive, I think this is a device that has a nice balance of everyday performance potential and long-lasting abilities, considering everything packaged together. It may not be the crazy powerful bang for your buck smartphone you're looking for, but there's still plenty of potential, at least if you're more of a casual user. Now, around back, while the camera setup has changed a bit, we get another sort of mixed bag of both upgrades and potential downgrades. So the main lens here is now a 64 megapixel f1.8 aperture shooter, and this is paired with a 2 megapixel macro lens and 2 megapixel depth sensor. There's no wide angle, no telephoto, and considering how useful both of those lenses are versus the macro lens, which I don't think I've ever used on any phone, I'm not so sure that this was the right move. Now, on the plus side, the camera app has been revamped quite a bit here, and we get a ton of great useful features, including night mode both up front and on the rear setups. The selfie camera, by the way, seems to be about the same 16 megapixel shooter. You've also got that high-res 64 megapixel shooting mode with the new main lens. There's plenty of Motorola specific camera add-ons like their spot color, there's a pro mode, but we lose out on things like 4K video recording, which is a shame. And like I mentioned a second ago, the useful lenses are gone too. So all in all, I guess I'm just gonna call this a wash. On the bright side, the pictures here have a ton of potential. The selfie camera produces a decent standard shot. Portrait mode looks pretty okay too. The rear lens looks really good. There's a ton of detail, and with the portrait shot here, the background and foreground separation looks really good, even with trickier parts like my hair. So all in all, while yes, there are some obvious improvements here, there are still plenty of negatives too, and I'm not exactly sure what the point is in taking back features and upgrades we already had. So if you couldn't tell already, this new Moto G9 Power is an interesting, albeit fairly confusing device, mainly if you are coming from last year's G8 Power. On its own, this new G9 Power is a decent phone with a lot to like. The big screen is a big plus for watching content, the massive battery means you'll get a ton of use out of this thing, and the upgraded main camera lens can certainly produce some great shots, especially given the fact that it is a $250 phone. But Motorola took back the dual stereo speakers, they downgraded the display resolution, and gave us a macro lens in place of useful other lenses. So this makes things kind of tough. If you have some other random budget device, this G9 Power for $250 or so isn't bad, but it seems to me like the G8 Power might still be better. If you have that phone, I can't imagine why you would get this one, and if you're considering this phone just in general from any other random phone, like I said, maybe just snag the G8 Power instead. But what do you guys think? Am I maybe missing something here? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I'd love to know what you guys think about this new G9 Power. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video though. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.